Hillson Aiello, and I will be your poetic guide for the next hour. This is informal, as Gabriel said. If you need to ask a question, please use the chat. And just a little bit more about me. I'm a member of the Poetry Society of Colorado, Poetry West, and Lighthouse Writers Workshop. I've been writing poetry for more than 5 decades, which has saved me a lot of money over the years because poetry is cheaper than therapy. Today's workshop is called Poetry for Non-Poets. We'll write a few poems, learn new skills, and gather some sources of inspiration. Just a little bit about housekeeping to get the most out of this workshop. I encourage you to put away your phone, mute your computer, get ready to write, and have fun. The only materials that you'll need for today is a pen, paper, and your imagination. This is a generative workshop, which means we will generate and write poetry. Many hobbies take up a lot of room in your home or require a big investment of money. But with writing, poetry, prose, essay, all you need is a pen and a paper. And if your paper or your pad is small enough, it fits in your pocket and you can take your skills with you anywhere. Writing poetry for the first time, and I am very nervous about teaching poetry over Zoom for the first time. And as much as I'd love to meet all of you, our time today is going to be spent on writing poetry. Poetry for non-poets. Poetry definitely has an easy button. I think we're taught to think about poetry as being difficult or hard to understand, that poetry is an archaeological dig to find meaning and metaphor. But to me, poetry is nothing more than the expression of emotions put into words. There are no rights, no wrongs. You don't need to edit. You don't have to worry about grammar or spelling. We just need to write. So I'm hoping today, through the exercises, you will gain some resources to write further poetry and also some inspiration. So go ahead and get your pen and your paper, because we're going to begin right away with a poem about Judaica. In my opinion, every object tells a story. So right now, I'd like you to either look around your room or close your eyes and find or think about an object related to Judaism that is meaningful to you. No need to overthink this. Just go ahead, find that object, think about that object, and write it down at the top of your paper, because this will be the foundation and the source for writing your poem. And that is step 1. Some ideas for you to consider in Judaica are candelabras, prayer books, a Hamsa or a Star of David. Of course, food is very motivating, and we love our food. And poetry lends itself to food, and food is also inspirational to poetry. Many of us play Jewish games. Of course, we play dreidel at Hanukkah time. I know my sister is on today. She plays mahjong. And as kids, we had the Jewish version of Monopoly called chutzpah, and that was a lot of fun, and that's what we're going to do today, is have fun. So now that you've had your object at the top of your page, I want you to start thinking about that object, whatever it is, in terms of the 5 senses, listing as many words as you can. And just as a reminder, here are the 5 senses. And we'll just take a couple of moments to do this. The color, the texture, how does it look? How does it taste? What might it sound like or smell like? How does it feel in your hand? And you might also attach emotion to it. How does this object make you feel when you look at it or smell it or touch it? So we are already on step 3. Step 3 is what's called a free write in writing. It's when you just press your pen or your pencil to paper. There's no editing, there's no rules. Using your sensory words without overthinking, correcting spelling, thinking about grammar. Take all of the thoughts that you have in your mind about your object and write them onto the paper. How does it make you feel? What memories does this object evoke? How does it look to you? What is the sound that it makes? How does it taste? And the most important thing is that this is not your poem. We are going to consider this field notes or a first draft, and from this, we will create your poem. I'm going to set a timer and give you some soft background music. So, how was that for everyone? Hopefully, you got to write down quite a bit about whatever object it is that you chose. So just to review, we thought about an object related to Judaism, or what we call Judaica, something that is personally meaningful to you. We thought about that object in terms of the five senses, because poetically speaking, those are the tools that poets use to really make their work shine and to have great imagery and word choice. Then we free wrote, which was just putting our pen to paper without editing or worrying or thinking about rules. And now we're on to step 4. And what I'm going to ask you to do for just a couple of minutes here is to underline the words in your free write that call to you. This is actually the foundation of your poem. You can add words as you go along to make more sense or to embellish the work. And again, don't be concerned about the format, or even if it rhymes, or even if it makes sense. It doesn't even need to make sense. There's always time in poetry to go back and edit. And we'll just take about 2 minutes here. So go ahead and try that. Okie dokie, how's everybody doing? Are you ready to move ahead? Because the next thing we're going to do is write your poem. But first, I'm going to take a moment and share with you one that I did using this exercise. So the top portion in the light shaded blue was my free write. I wrote about when I was a kid. My mother didn't light Shabbos candles, but she made the best matzo ball soup, and how my friends loved coming to our house to eat that soup, and the smell of it on the stove made my mouth water. And now bringing it to the current, every time I roll the dough into balls and drop them into vegetarian broth, my mom comes to mind. And that even without the chicken, I make a great matzo ball soup that my grandkids love. And I translated that into a much longer poem, but I'm just going to share the first stanza with you. And that stanza is Kiddush. My mother forgot to teach me Kiddush, chicken soup eaten unblessed in our home. She did remember to impart the magic of matzo balls, her secret to the lightest, fluffiest dumplings. So the top is written like a block or a paragraph with sentences, maybe not perfectly formed sentences, but sentence-like. And as you can see, the poem is written with a lot more white space, room between the lines, a little bit of room for the poem to breathe, more clipped word choices, the words that really resonated with me, that meant something to me, and very little punctuation. And that's what I'm going to ask you to try to do now, is to convert your block of prose with your sensory words, the senses, the 5 senses that you put into the poem, into your words, and your underlining, and use those as a foundation to try to write a poem. And these will be rough, and they'll be unfinished, and maybe they'll need work or editing down the road. This is just to give you an idea that if you really want to write a poem, it's as easy as the 5 steps that we've gone through. And just to review those really quickly, we have an object, we wrote about the senses, we did a free write, we underlined the words that meant something to us. And now I'm going to encourage you to try to write a poem. Any form, doesn't need to rhyme, don't worry about spelling, punctuation, grammar, and we'll take 5 minutes for this. Does anybody want to share? And if you do, just let Gabriel know, or this would also be a good time if you have any questions about this portion of the workshop, because we're going to change gears here in just a moment. So I would love to hear some shares.
So the object, which might not strictly be speaking within your definition, but hey, this is poetry. The Book of Psalms. I have a copy of the Book of Psalms that for some reason resonates comfort to me. And so I wrote about it. Comfort draws my heart like a 6B pencil, outlining the muscles and sinews, waiting for me to come to the paper and acknowledge, yes, this is me. This is me as I am here and now, without expectation or desire. This is me in outline, in substance, in heart and soul. Unacknowledged or acknowledged, I am here.
That was lovely. And so lovely to hear a poem in your voice. Thank you so much for sharing.
This is more of an essay than a poem in my mind, but I'd be happy to read it and I'll let you decide. When I looked around the room, I found my star, my Jewish star, my Mogan Devad, and this is what I wrote. One second. My star, my beautiful star, stands out on my neck and shows in my home. I show it to the world. I show it without shame. I show it with pride. It makes me feel good, and I remember the past and wonder about the future. Thinking of my Bubby, I take joy in wearing her star. It reminds me of my family of Jews, the past, the present, and the future.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Mine is actually about the challah tray. Rainy day in Sorrento, Italy. Sought warmth in woodworker's shop. It's kind of hard for me to, it's good memories, but it's hard for me to remember. Inlaid Star of David in multicolors of wood. Menorah of 7 branches, a perfect souvenir. Challah tray for Shabbat or Yom Tov. Sweet raisin challah, long or round. Comfort food to reminisce childhood. A constant, beautiful reminder of travels and childhood memories. Patiently waiting from one week to the next for the delicious challah crumbs. Remember Shabbat and Chagim.
You know, I don't want to say I'm glad you got emotional, but that is so much the heart of poetry, is that it draws out of us that sometimes things that we don't really let go. And it's just beautiful that you're sharing from your heart. So thank you. So this is Yehuda Amakai, who is considered, first I should say we're going to change gears. We're going to go from a little bit of the generative workshop, and I'm just going to talk a little bit more about poetry now. This is Yehuda Amakai. He's considered the most widely translated poet since King David, which is really quite the achievement, because King David is credited with writing 80 of the 150 Psalms. He was born in Germany in 1924 and went to Jerusalem in 1936. He passed away in the year 2000. He is Israel's greatest modern poet, and he was nominated for the Nobel Prize in Literature several times. You can find more information about Yehuda Amakai or any poets on the poetryfoundation.org or the American Academy of Poets. Inside the brand new museum, there's an old synagogue. Inside the synagogue is me. Inside me, my heart. Inside my heart, a museum. Inside the museum, a synagogue. Inside it, me. Inside me, my heart. Inside my heart, a museum. So we're going to do a quick exercise with this one that's called an emulation. And it's when we try to write in the style of another writer. And so what I want you to notice about the style of this poem is that there is not a lot of words used in this poem. And specifically, there are 4 key words in this poem: synagogue, museum, heart, and me. I put this work right after the Days of Awe, And I had had a discussion with my brother about whether or not I beat my chest and does he beat his chest. And the combination of this poem, and that conversation had me write this emulation, which I'll share with you today. So this is me using very limited language and trying to write in that style that Mr. Amakai modeled for us. First temple of my life, an old Quonset hut, burnt to the ground. The second temple of my life, my father helped to build, through moxie, not sweat. The last temple of my life is right here. In the heart I beat, in my beating heart. Mildly edited because I had time to do that, but pretty much this is how it came out. So I would just like to take 3 or 4 minutes here and have you think about the keywords that were in that poem: synagogue, museum, heart, me. Feel free to use any, all, or none of those words to do a very short, quick poem that really speaks to something about you and maybe how you feel about Judaism, which is what to me this poem is all about. Again, would anybody like to share what they wrote? We know these are not finished, perfect, edited poems. These are just quick writes from our heart.
Inside that Quonset hut synagogue, me, heart pounding in me, flames roaring near me, sirens blaring at me, mothers crying with me. Will the memory be a museum of children's remains?
That was really incredible. You can infer that Harry is my brother, and the very first temple of our lives, or at least the one I remember, they might have had one before me, burnt to the ground. It was very emotional. Does anybody else want to share?
And I was in it.
Yes, he was in it.
Cannot physically go to temple now, but I am grateful to open Zoom and listen to Rabbi Fletcher's Parsha on Mondays and Facebook services on Friday evenings. It means a lot to me, and my heart fills with spirituality.
I don't go to synagogue, but I feel Judaism in my heart. My heart goes to Judaism. When I think of all the anti-Semitism in the world, can I truly be a Jew without a synagogue?
Inspiration, because people are always asking me how I get inspired to write a poem, where do I get my ideas? And in the original description of this workshop, it was inferred that we would do a lot of playing to create a poem, but a lot of those activities are hands-on and just don't lend themselves to Zoom. So I'm going to share them with you here, and those are things that you can do at home. But first, I thought I'd give you a peek into the inside of my head. This is where my inspiration mostly comes from. I look at billboards. I cull phrases and words from books and magazines. I listen to a lot of music and take a line or a lyric and weave it into a poem. And of course, as a writer, I eavesdrop, but it's not called eavesdropping, it's research and development. Every day, I get the Merriam-Webster word of the day delivered to my inbox. I get to learn a new word, and I often try to use that word in a poem for the day. I did this in June of 2019, and I kept track of how many words I knew and how many I didn't. And I didn't know 16 words, and I knew 15 of the words. So that was a fun way, and this is something we can all do, learn a new word, keep language in our heads. There are also a lot of word-related games available on the App Store. These keep words in our mind, they keep our mind sharp, language, the alphabet, and this is a great way to be inspired during the pandemic. We all spend a lot of time on our phones. We might as well try to use them for some inspiration. Another thing that I do is play 7 little words, and I really like this game because it makes me think, but I will also often say, I'm going to pick 3 of these words and I'm going to write a poem from them. And that also gets me to thinking outside the box. It's okay for it to be a sentence translated into a poem. It's okay for it to be silly. It's really okay for it to not even make any sense. You just call it a surrealistic poem when it doesn't make any sense. And if we had a little bit more time today, I would have had us write from this, but I'm hoping that you'll take some of these ideas where these words are available. In poetry, we call them found words, and use them as inspiration. I also do a game with kids mostly, but adults seem to like it too, called Word Salad. I have a big giant bowl of words and phrases that I've cut out of magazines. And what I do is pass the bowl around the room. We take a random handful of those words, and then we arrange them to be a goofy, serious, nonsensical poem. I find these words in the magazines, in magazines and newspapers. Junk mail is really a great place for them. And again, on a day like today, when it's too cold to walk and we're just sitting around, get your pen out, get your paper out, and just do a little word salad. So on the screen now is my big bowl of words. I actually have 2 big giant bowls of words at this point. What's really funny about this exercise is that most people take a really giant handful of letters and words and phrases thinking it's going to be easier, but it's actually more difficult. And here's what I wrote from the words that I picked. Oi to joy, pure bugging out, any way you want it. A close encounter, said no one ever. Cake, it's in her DNA. Sweet baby, find the rooster at your fingertips, selfies through the ages, 2020 Colorado. Excuse me, and of course, that's pretty current for today. Another type of poetry that I really enjoy writing is ekphrastic. Ekphrastic poetry explores art. It uses a rhetorical device known as ekphrasis. The poet engages with a painting, a drawing, sculpture, or other form of visual, dance arts, whatever it is, and you use that as an inspiration to write. The art box I bought online, as I did the postcards also. The art box are beautiful, high-quality photographs of pieces in the Museum of Modern Art. And then the 3 postcard books on the other side of the screen are all Jewish-inspired. And I did get those online also. So you can just take a look at a postcard, a picture in a magazine, a famous work of art. How does it make you feel? Does it inspire you to write? A very quick story I like to tell about the last one, the Jewish art postcards. I was teaching a class to bar and bat mitzvah candidates in Colorado Springs at Temple Shalom. And one of the kids wasn't very interested until we got to the ekphrastic part of the writing. And he immediately picked up a postcard and started yelling for the other kids to come over, because as a class, they had done a trip with the rabbi the year before to the Skirbel Museum and Cultural Center. And he remembered seeing that art, and it really inspired him and opened him up and sharing. And it was just fantastic. The other thing is, let people know that you're interested in writing poetry, and you may get a few presents along the lines like I have. Also, I firmly believe that you need to read poetry in order to write poetry. There's a lot of many famous Jewish poets to explore. Ones that we're very aware of are Leonard Cohen, Bob Dylan, Stanley Kunitz, and Denise Levertov. If you find a poet whose style or whose words you enjoy, you can try some emulations. You can explore different styles and subject matter just to kind of keep you going on your poetic journey. And as we're coming to the end, I'm very quickly going to play this clip. I would be remiss by not mentioning Louise Glick today. Last month, she won the Nobel Peace Prize in Literature. And in 1993, she won the Pulitzer for her book, The Wild Iris. And this is a very short clip of her reading a poem from The Wild Iris.
Not the sun merely, but the earth itself shines, white fire leaping from the showy mountains and the flat road shimmering in early morning. Is this for us only to induce response, or are you stirred also, helpless to control yourself in earth's presence? I am ashamed at what I thought you were, distant from us, regarding us as an experiment. It is a bitter thing to be the disposable animal, a bitter thing. Dear friend, dear trembling partner, what surprises you most in what you feel? Earth's radiance or your delight? For me, always the delight is the surprise.
For me, always the delight is the surprise. Again, quickly, Louise's ability to create poetry that many people can understand, relate to, and experience intensely and completely stems from her deceptively straightforward language and poetic voice. You can learn more about Louise at thepoetryfoundation.org. And I'd like to also say that Ms. Glick is another great Jewish poet to try and emulate on your own. Her books are widely available online. And that brings us to the end of my presentation today. I hope you found inspiration and enjoyed maybe writing what could have been your first poem. I really want to thank you for coming on this cold day and devoting your time to poetry. I appreciate it very much. And this was Poetry for Non-Poets.